Ronnie, pleasure to meet you.
Yes, good to meet you.
Commiserations for last night. Alan played, Mark Allen played well. Played well enough to beat you. Is that an indictment on what you've got to do in this game? You've got to win when you're playing well. Is that pretty much how it goes?
Yeah, you need to. I think nowadays it's sort of standard is so good that any mistake there is punished heavily. And I think in my last two tournaments that I've played, that's been evident. You know, I haven't really done a lot wrong, but you know, a lot of credit has to go to my opponent because they both played really well. So, you know, it was more the case that they won the match rather than me losing it. So, you know, just need to kind of up my game a little bit just to turn them results around.
You've won it 4 times. I mean, what was the sweetest of those 4 victories?
The sweetest of them 4 victories would have to probably be. They've all been sweet, really. You know, every major tournament you win is a sweet win, and you know they was all good in their own different ways. And you know, I couldn't really pick one out more than the others. I think the one where I beat Ding in the final, I think that was probably some of the best snooker that I played all during the tournament. I felt really relaxed and felt that every shot that I was playing was coming off really good. So you know, that was the most confident I felt. So that probably felt the easiest win, but you know, a win's a win, and you kind of get good delight at just having won a major event like that. So
when you were a young boy, a young teenager, did you think you'd be sitting there at 35 having won what you'd won?
Yeah, it was always a dream of mine. When obviously you're younger, you just dream of them things, but you never actually think in reality that it's actually going to happen until it actually happens. So you know, when you get a bit older, you sit back and you think, you know what, I've had a really good career. You know, and if someone would have offered me that at the start, I'd have definitely took it. But obviously, you know, you want to win more, and obviously, you know, having won 3 worlds, 4 UKs and 4 Masters, I'd like to win maybe an extra one world or something, or 1 UK or another Masters. So you know, so you're always looking to kind of keep winning, because it's like you said before, it's a nice sweet feeling winning.
You're part of the Riley's Future Stars initiative in 2011. You did it last year. How important are initiatives like this, and why they're necessary in your opinion?
Yeah, I definitely think it's good to, you know, for any grassroots and any type of academies that you can get people together. And you know, it was always a wish of mine to work with other snooker players. And when Riley's come along with this opportunity, it was a kind of idea of mine that, you know, how can we help the youngsters out? And I definitely think that, you know, through clubs that you get. I mean, I had fantastic support when I was younger from all the older members. It was like they were so interested in watching a young kid growing up and getting better and better, and it was a talking point in the club. And I think with this initiative that we've done with Riley's, it definitely is going to create a focal point and a talking point in each club to see that, you know, the youngsters coming through and doing really well. So it's something I'm really passionate about, and last year was a massive success. You know, working with Joel, who managed to win it last year, and he's gone on to play in a few big snooker events this year. I've managed to spend 2 or 3 days with him, practicing with him, giving him a few little tips and advice, and it's definitely helped his game. He's become a much more better player for it, and you know, this is their 2nd year of doing it, and I think it's only going to get bigger and better. And I expect the standard to be a lot stronger this year than it actually was last year. So
should more initiatives like this be done?
I definitely think, you know, anything that sort of supports people and helps people and gives them the opportunity to kind of do better at something is a good, you know, because not a lot of people get the support and backing that they need. I was pretty lucky that I come into snooker in an era when it was really buzzing, so there was lots of snooker clubs, and because business was doing well, they could afford to give me free time, whereas nowadays business is hard, and a youngster might go in there and they might say, you know, he hasn't got £4 or £5 an hour to play. So I think giving this opportunity for youngsters is also giving them the opportunity to be able to go and play and learn their trade, you know, without having to worry about the financial side of it.
Could schools get involved? I mean, with all the playing fields being closed down, you think the natural progression or maybe somewhere to go, keep kids playing sport for all the benefits that come from that, would be to throw a snooker or a pool table in every school. I mean, is that so far-fetched? Couldn't that happen?
No, I definitely think it could happen. I mean, table tennis was, you know, that was virtually the size of a snooker table, so instead of having 20 table tennis tables, why not have 10 and have 6 or 7 snooker tables? at least give the choice to the youngsters to decide what they want to play, because you never know. You could get some young boy going on there who finds the game really easy, and all of a sudden, through that one shot that he's played, he's discovered that he's got a passion and a love for something, and from there, the school could, maybe identify and spot that, send him to the local Riley's club, and there's the opportunity for him, keeps him off the streets, gives him a purpose in life and a focus. Yeah, definitely.
You're a star, the likes of which kids can probably relate to more so than the rest of the protagonists in snooker. Does the sport suffer from a lack of celebrity status?
I think in a certain way, certainly in other sports, a lot of the youngsters can identify with a lot of other sportsmen, probably more in football, tennis, and golf, and things like that. I think, whereas in snooker, it's kind of a lot of players don't really show their emotions, or they don't really say sometimes what they actually feel, and sometimes from the public's point of view, they want to get to know the person. I think sometimes
that's what people like about you, though. I think that's kind of why you the people, maybe a wider demographic and wider scope of people find you more endearing, a character away from the table, as they do a skilled player on it. Why aren't players a bit more emotive, show a little bit more of their character? Why does it kind of seems set in stone how they should be, according to maybe the game how it was played yesteryear?
Yeah, I mean, just sometimes it's sort of. Sometimes I can be my own worst critic. I can come off the table and say, I haven't played well, and I've won a tournament and I've made 3 or 4. Sometimes people think it's the most bizarre statements you can make, but sometimes all I'm doing is speaking the truth, my own truth. But in reality, in other people's eyes, they probably think, well, what is he going on about? And then you become like sometimes this intriguing character that people think, well, what's he going to say next? So you kind of appeal to a broader audience other than just snooker fans. And I think sometimes, the way I play and some of the things I say and some things I do, it can sometimes not be the norm compared to what other snooker players. So you kind of separate yourself from everybody else, and you kind of get this following and popularity amongst people that probably just wouldn't watch snooker. So I think it's nice that you can appeal to some youngsters and a broad, quite a range of people, if you like, and all the support I've had over the years has been great, I wouldn't change it for the world, so I've had great support all through my snooker, and if people have followed me over the years, I've enjoyed all that support as well.
What, apart from some of the things we've identified, would help to jazz up the sport and make it even more appealing to youngsters?
I definitely think snooker in general is what it is. It's a very skillful sport, and I think sometimes you need to be a purist to sometimes enjoy and appreciate the skill involved. But to definitely jazz up and kind of get a new audience, a younger audience involved in snooker, I think you have just look at maybe power snooker, which was really successful. I agree, it's not ideal for the purist, but I definitely think that there's a place in snooker to have an event like that. Whereas, because I definitely think the culture has changed in our life. Kids of 2010 are not like kids in the 1960s. There's so much choice out there now, and I think young kids like the razzmatazz, they like their rap music, they like their kind of their style, their clothing, they like their girls, they like their this and they like their that. And I think that sometimes you need to incorporate a sport where you can have all of that involved.
You tried years ago. I remember years ago, because I followed your career from when I was young, and I remember you. Somebody asked you if you were being sponsored by a particular brand, and you said no, not until Prada come in. That was years ago. Years ago, when nobody really, youngsters, I mean kids who were on the street who kind of had that edge, that swagger about them, which is one of the things I think people like about you knew about. Is that what you're talking about when you say?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the sort of thing that we all identify with, and you kind of want to be associated with things that you, away from snooker, you would just do in every normal life, and young kids have got their own style, they've got their own personality, and they want to be able to have that naturally, but within the sport, and not be told that you can't dress like this, you can't do that, you can't act like this, and because then you start suppressing someone's attitude and their beliefs in life, and a lot of people that are successful and want to do well don't like being told what to do. I think with the younger generation you kind of have to go with it a little bit, so by opening up these power snooker and having a younger audience and crowd participation, I think that just kind of lends itself to the culture that we're in but I definitely think there's a space for the purist and the new generation that like to come out to music, that like to have girls in the crowd that are supporting them.
Cricket did it. 2020 has attracted a whole new crowd.
You just have to watch the darts as well.
Yeah, darts, exactly.
I mean, they had Prince Harry there, because he's just one of the lads at the end of the day that wants to go out with his mates, have a few pints, and not be, and be in an environment where the atmosphere is buzzing and, he's having a good time.
I interviewed Rory McLeod years ago, and the whole point of that interview was to kind of identify why it is that more black players are not involved in this sport. Can you answer that?
It is strange in a way, but I think I can't really understand why there's not more black players, and I don't know. It's a really difficult one to answer. Maybe because sport is not such an athletic sport. I think if you look at the athletic sports, it's predominantly dominated by black people. Usain Bolt, Michael Johnson, Muhammad Ali.
There's not enough exertion.
I don't think so. I think more, get more. I think snooker's a bit of a subdued, a bit of a quiet sort of. And,
it takes a type of character. Then,
I think it takes a quite of a. A Steve Davis type character. I couldn't imagine him coming out wanting to do the 100-metre sprint.
Well, true.
Because it's not his personality.
I did see Steve at a concert the other day that it showed me nameless.
But I think Rory is. I played him in the UK a couple of years ago. And, I went 6-0 up, and I was playing well. And then he come back to 6-all, and he made 3 centuries. And Peter Ebdon always said to me, he said he's a really underrated player. And I hadn't seen a lot of Rory play. I'm quite good friends with Rory and always have a chat with him at the tournaments. But I haven't seen a lot of his games, to be fair. And it wasn't until I played him and he come back at me, and I was like, oh. And them words, what Ebdon was saying, I thought, well, he was right there. Yeah. He was right there. But I mean, I think Rory's has underachieved through what I've seen, and I think that can only be down to consistency. Because if he played
dedication,
more, no, not dedication. I know he's a dedicated player. I know he puts a lot of work in, and probably one of the hardest working pros. But sometimes it's just getting that breakthrough and getting that confidence. And once you win one tournament, then the rest kind of takes care of itself. So,
what made it sexy in China?
Like I say, I think it just lends itself to that culture of. The Chinese like to bet, they like to just sit there, and it's cool. Like it's their kind of sport, if you like. They can meditate to it, they can relax, they watch it, they get the kind of
suits their demeanour.
I think
as
so,
a culture.
as a culture, and I think that they kind of it works out there, if you know what I mean. It's sort of a weird one really, but they do like their snooker out there.
Ultimately, Ronnie, to make it in any sport, you need to have some talent, determination to get that talent if you don't have it, dedication.
Yeah.
I mean, what 3 points of advice could you give to any aspiring snooker player, be they young or somebody who's been trying for years but just can't seem to pull it together?
I think you just need to play as many competitions as you can. You need to be amongst, if what I've done and what I think helped me become a better player was that I was always looking to play the best player in the club. I was always looking to want to play the best amateur. I didn't want to not meet Peter Ebdon in the final. I wanted to beat Pete. I was only a junior, I think I was 13 or 14, and Peter was 20. And he was an adult and I was a kid, but I wanted to play him. I wanted to play Ken Doherty. I wanted to play all the best players in the world just to see if I could beat them. And I think that that's the kind of attitude that youngsters need to have, is that, how can I get to play them? Ring them up, practice with them, enter the tournaments that they're entering, just in the hope that you might get to play them. And that's what I've done as a youngster, and that's probably why I kind of developed quickly as a player and become so good at such a young age. And I think that that's what youngsters need to do now, is kind of find out earlier on where the best players are, get in there, mix it with them, and then if you've got that determination and drive to absorb a lot of beatings along the way and come back stronger, you'll be a better player for it.
I mean, obviously losing last night, that was going to be my first question. I rephrased it on the train, but you've got to learn to lose, haven't you, in your ascent
you can't.
to perfection.
It's part of the, if you like, it's part of the learning process. Sometimes, like I said, years when you take up the game, you dream of winning these titles, but when you do win the titles, you look back and you see that sometimes it was the learning process of getting beaten, the disappointments that made you the complete player that you need to be. And I think that that's what's happened over the years. I think a great example of that was when Stephen Hendry turned professional. And Hendry's manager said to Barry, and he said, right, 6 nights in Scotland, Steve Davis against Stephen Hendry, 10 grand a night, and Barry went, lovely job, Lee, that's 60 grand in the bank. And Davis beat Hendry 9-0, 9-1, 9-2, 9-0, 9-1. But then Stephen Hendry's manager said that was the best money he'd ever spent, because Hendry come away and realised that where he needed to go with his game in order to become the player he was. And, you know, 7 world titles later, the most successful snooker player in the history of the game, is because he got a battering, you know, and learned from it and come back. It didn't break him. Some people that could have broke, but Hendry, I think his manager realised that he had the strength of character to kind of learn from that, wanted to learn from that, and he was probably the one saying to his manager, get me a game with Steve Davis.
So as my last question is, you seemed like you was getting frustrated with the sport a few years ago, maybe some personal inner turmoil, it happens. I recently turned 30, so I know how it goes. And I know I look older than I. But,
you said that, not me.
It's written all over your face. But I wanted to know, do you think the next phase of kind of involvement with snooker, the coaching and stuff, do you think that will be it? Do you think you'll find peace with that? And do you think it'll be as rewarding as playing?
I think it'll be a different type of reward. You know, obviously there's no reward for you know, being out there competing and winning titles, and just beating your opponent and playing really well and reaching heights that you know only you can reach as a competitor. But obviously, you know, it'd be nice to think back later on in my career that, you know, maybe I could have had a bit of a helping hand, and maybe some youngster that wants to be world champion and wants to learn, and maybe I can add on a few tips to him, and if I can be part of that, then great. You know, I mean, you know, it's always nice to be involved in snooker in some sort of capacity, even if it's not playing. You know, and one day that'll happen. You know, like it happens to everybody, like Steve Davis and Jimmy White. You know, probably not winning like they used to, but at least they're still giving something back to the sport. You know.
Thanks for your time.
Oh, thank you. Cheers.